Today, we're going to dive into a statement from one of history's greatest minds, St. Thomas Aquinas, that, let's be honest, sounds completely shocking to us today. It involves Joseph, Mary, and a word that makes us all just stop in our tracks: violation. So, what on earth could he have actually meant by that? So, here it is. This is the quote at the very heart of this whole thing. Aquinas says that to even suggest Joseph had relations with Mary would be an imputation of extreme presumption and an attempt to violate her. I mean, at first glance, that is a jarring, almost offensive thing to read. But what if the words themselves are the key to the whole puzzle? So how could one of the Church's most revered saints use language like this about Joseph, a man the Bible calls just and righteous? This isn't just a simple statement. It's a theological puzzle. And to solve it, we basically need to become detectives and look for the clues hidden inside the language itself. Okay, let's start by breaking down that first key phrase, extreme presumption. It's definitely not a phrase you hear every day, but for Aquinas, it was a very specific and incredibly serious spiritual charge. Understanding this is our first step to unlocking the entire argument. First up is the word imputation. It sounds really formal, but it's just a way of saying to accuse someone of something. But here's the crucial twist. Aquinas isn't actually accusing Joseph of anything. He's arguing that a different theological position wrongly accuses Joseph of this sin. He's playing defense for Joseph, not attacking him. So what is this sin of presumption? It's not about assuming something in the way we use the word today. Theologically, it's a spiritual sin of profound arrogance. It's about acting with this crazy overconfidence toward God, like demanding grace without being worthy or claiming a right to something that God has specifically set apart. It's a sin of deep, deep irreverence. And why did Aquinas call it extreme? Well, because Joseph wasn't in the dark here. An angel had explicitly told him what was going on. Mary was carrying the Son of God, conceived by the Holy Spirit. So to then treat her like an ordinary wife would mean willfully ignoring a direct message from God, and that's an act of extreme disrespect to God himself. And this brings us to the most loaded word in the entire quote, the one that causes all the confusion: violate. But it turns out its historical meaning is the key that unlocks this entire mystery. You see, when we hear violate, our minds immediately go to physical assault. But Aquinas, who was writing in Latin, used the word violare, and in his theological world, that word meant to desecrate or profane something holy, like vandalizing a church or defiling a sacred object. He's not talking about assault, he's talking about sacrilege. And why on earth would it be sacrilege? Because in this one unique, unrepeatable moment in all of human history, Mary's body wasn't just her own anymore. It had become the living temple of God. The Holy Spirit had consecrated her as the shrine where God himself took on flesh. She was, in a very real and literal sense, a holy place. The Old Testament actually has this incredibly powerful story that illustrates the gravity of this. The Ark of the Covenant was the holiest object in Israel. At one point, it was about to fall off a cart, and a man named Uzzah reached out to study it. A good intention, right? But he was struck dead on the spot just for touching the sacred. The point is the same. You do not intrude upon something God has claimed as his own. Now, it is absolutely critical to understand that this theological point about Mary and Joseph is a singular exception. It is not and was never, ever intended to be a commentary on ordinary marriage. That is a hugely important distinction to make. The consistent teaching is that marital intimacy is not only good, but holy. It's described as noble and honorable, an act that actually enriches the couple. This positive view is the universal rule. The situation with the Holy Family is the one, unique, unrepeatable exception to that rule. So on one side, you have ordinary marriage, a holy sacrament where intimacy is a sacred gift. And on the other, you have the marriage of Mary and Joseph, a completely unique event where Mary's body was set apart by God in a way that will never, ever happen again, and that reality fundamentally changed the nature of their union. So, after unpacking all the language and the context, let's bring it all back together. Why should we even care about this centuries-old theological debate? What's the big takeaway from understanding what Aquinas really meant? Well, there are really three key reasons. First, it protects the sheer awe and mystery of the incarnation, of God becoming man. Second, it elevates St. Joseph. It shows him not as a man who was denied something, but as a profoundly virtuous man who understood the sacred duty he was given. And third, it's a fantastic reminder that context is everything. Words change, and we have to understand them in their own time. This whole explainer hinged on understanding that one single word, violate, didn't mean back then what violate means to us now. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other historical ideas, arguments, or texts are we totally misunderstanding simply because we forget to stop and ask that crucial question?